a lot of retailers have somebody on the payroll who is sort of the head. I don't know what the titles are, but they're sort of the head installer, and they sort of oversee jobs, and they may go out and do final inspections and so on. I don't know what they call them, but would that, if somebody does that, would that put them in jeopardy to have all of the installer, all the subcontractors they use, perhaps be identified as employees?
Not necessarily, but a good example would be recently there was a determination in a state that because you sent 2 flooring subcontractors to a job, that meant you had to supervise them. And because you had to supervise them on site, they made them employees.
And this happens every day, sort of one place or another.
This is a daily occurrence for you retailers. And I'm sure there are many retailers out there saying, geez, it never happened to me. I remember I used to race bicycles, and somebody had said to me there's only 2 type of bicycle racers, those that have fallen and those that will in an accident. And he says they're usually the same people. Well, the answer is if you're a retailer and you use independent contractors, it may have not happened to you, but the ice is getting thinner and thinner daily. Because
I would say the current state of federal, state, local governments is to find money under every rock. And it would seem to me that this is another place they potentially can increase their revenue.
I think that's a fair estimate, is that we recently have a company who was audited, found to have some lackings, fulfilled every one of the obligations they did. They're now being re-audited about 5 years later and told their independent contractors still employees, even though they did everything they were told to do 5 years ago. But if they're not employees, there's not tax money for that state.
So I would say be on guard, and of course the white paper is something that everybody needs to check out here to at least minimize the chance.
Yeah, the white paper is designed not just to give you an overview, but sort of a practical approach as well. I mean, I think everybody's going to love the base contract, but I don't want people to think the contract's going to be, a wherefore-all or, a heaven sent that I'll never have a problem. But it should minimize your problem. And if I were to give anybody who's independent contracts a couple of pieces of advice, my answers would be, 1, have a contract with your people. Okay? You don't have a contract for every job. You can do a master contract, okay? But have a contract with those people. Make sure they have their own investment company. I prefer them that ensure they have insurance, and you can get certificates of insurance. The insurance companies will issue them to you to prove they have insurance. Commercial floor covering people have to give them all the time to the general contractor. It's a common occurrence. Make sure they have a true separate entity. And make sure they're not only working for you. If those things are done, you've now minimized that by at least 70% already.
I would think that last part would be edgy. I know a lot of installers have worked for the same retailer for years, forever perhaps.
They can work for the same retailer. They just can't work for only that retailer. That's the issue.
Just sort of an add-on question. With Obamacare coming, I'm wondering if they're going to include contractors in numbers in terms of employees, or has that even been determined yet?
No, the 50-employee rule is the equivalent of 50 employees. So you can have 70 employees, but if they're all part-time and they would add up to 35, then you wouldn't hit it. So they're looking at an equivalent of a full-time worker. An independent contractor should not fill in that way. But obviously you now have another issue. Because if I can make these 20 independent contractors, employees, I put you over the 50-person threshold, and all of a sudden. On the other hand, people may look at independent contractors to avoid hitting that 50-person threshold. I do believe if we can ever find a Congress that will cooperate and an administration that will not dig its heels in too deeply, Obamacare has many good things to it. I think many people are starting to recognize that. There are many pieces that need to be fixed. And the 50-person threshold clearly is one of them. The idea that all of a sudden your liability is enormous when you hit the 50-person threshold makes no sense. Everything else we do graduates in. You have more liability if you have 200 employees than if you have 50. But you don't have the same liability at 50 as you have at 200. Why do you have that same liability when you hit 50 on health care? And so we need to fix that. And there are many other things that need to be fixed in it. My only hope is that we'll get there someday.
But the bottom line here in terms of the relationship with a contractor is if you haven't had the government call you and tell you we need to come and talk with you, there probably is a great chance they may do that in the future, and you need to follow the tips according to your white paper.
If you've been living under the radar so far, that radar has just gotten much broader, so be very, very careful.
When will members of the WFCA see this white paper?
It's essentially done. We're waiting for some other potentially new laws changing in a couple of states. Maryland has just recently changed their law. We want to look at that stuff to make sure we're up to date, so it's not dated the day it comes out. And so we're hoping within the next 45 to 75 days it'll be out for everybody. If you're a member, it's available without charge, actually, to a member.
Well, it sounds like it's a great insurance policy here, and when everybody who is a member needs to go over it with a fine-tooth comb just about.
As I've explained to people who've asked me about this, I cannot make you, an independent contractor expert. I can't make you an independent contract lawyer who knows every avenue of this. What I can do is make you sensitive to the issues, so when you do something, you think about it. And you think, is this the right way to do it? What I'm doing now, because I've always done it, is that the right way, or do I risk? If I have a relationship, if I change it because it'll get me more money, it's a better deal for me, does that change the relationship that could run liability to you that would ruin that deal in the long run? So I'm not trying to get you to know exactly what to do. I just want you to know when to ask the question, or to yourself to say, okay, is there another issue here? This looks really good, but would this create a problem with are they employees or independent contractors? If I can get that to everybody, we have done a great service, because now they know what questions to ask so they can minimize their liability and the risks of that liability.
And the potential risks are quite high.
Very, very high. In some states, there's daily fines of $1,500 per independent contractor. Well, since audits take place years later, you can imagine what liability can be. There are states where they'll freeze your income tax returns. They'll freeze assets on you if they find potential liability here. And, of course, there's always a mandate of back pay and back overtime pay and back Social Security contributions, as well as many states issue significant fines.
So that just means that this can close you down if you don't do the best you can with this whole effort.
I think this has closed some companies down. And there's no reason not to use independent contractors. There's just a caution that needs to be taken with them. If your business model lends itself to independent contractors, do that. Just do the caution so you don't find yourself, thinking you're sitting happy and pretty, and 5 years later find out you have 5 years of liability.
Jeff, this is a great timing here, too, and something surely that every retailer needs to be aware of.
One thing we must understand with the independent retailer, they're the best in their business. They're better than these massive box stores, in my opinion. Surveys have shown they're better. In the building industry, the number of floors put in on tract homes by independent dealers as opposed to, pure contractors and such, in all honesty, is the highest of any other subcontractor in the building industry. That's how good our dealers are. But why are they good? What distinguishes them? Quality. Knowledge and quality. And part of that knowledge is their knowledge of installation, measuring, carpeting. But part of that quality is also installation. You put in quality flooring and it shows. And they do that better than anybody. So independent contractors can be an important role in that. But you need to make sure that you follow all the cautions. One of the things I also have told people, if you're really trying to drive that independent contractor door down, don't walk down like that, to the bottom dollar. And a wage and hour comes in to look at you, and they see you're paying the guy $1.05 to put in carpet per square foot. They're going to go crazy. They're going to want to make that person an employee because they think you're cheating them. So pay a fair rate. Do that kind of stuff.
That's interesting. That's an interesting aspect, too, because I know there's a lot of people probably guilty of that. Probably many that are.
They may be. I'm not trying to tell you, line the streets with gold, but recognize that we've been encouraging people to actually track hours of their independent contractors so they know the rates they're paying. In California, you can actually face liability if you don't track that. and other states are going to start adopting that. It's not that you're liable for the wage and hour of them, but you're liable to ensure that records are being kept. And if your independent contractor doesn't keep those records, you're liable for not keeping them. So, I mean, I do know there's computer companies in this industry are coming out now with new programs that allow you to track it by phone. They dial a number in and they hit a button, and it tells you when they got on the job. They hit another button, it tells you when they're taking a break, when they're off their break, and when they leave their job. And you can track the hours with accuracy. By the way, that actually has been important for people. There was a claim with an independent contractor being hurt on the job. If they had that system, it would have proven he wasn't there because he wasn't that day. He was hurt otherwise. So we eventually were able to prove that. But you could imagine how easy it would have been with the phone system. We would have known he wasn't there because he didn't dial in.
Another reason to have industry-specific software.
Yes, and we have some companies out there that do terrific jobs with that. That go from the front room to the back room to the accounting room, and it works seamlessly. And this is just another one of those things.
This is a pivotal issue, and I think this white paper is something everybody needs to check out because, as you mentioned, this has closed down people. It
has, and it's one of the services that WFCA is giving, and I think it's one of they do many, many things for the independent contractor. It fascinates me that everybody who's an independent flooring contractor didn't want to join them because what they provide, even as I read this stuff, I think, my God, this is so useful. I might be able to be a floor dealer. And I'm just a lawyer. I don't have any knowledge otherwise. So.
Well, this is worth the price of admission. Forget about the education and all the rest of the things. This is worth. Jeff, I really appreciate you joining us. It's great seeing you, and it's always a pleasure learning from you.
Well, Dave, I enjoy it, and I hope we keep this up. It's a good friendship, and I enjoyed talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. We've been talking with Jeff King. He is counsel for the WFCA, the World Floor Covering Association, and this is Talk Floor TV.